Cool. Okay. So I'm assuming I'm on. Hey, everybody. My name is Chris Alvarez, founder of Transcend Enterprise, and currently we are here at the office, Transcend Enterprise office, a little bit empty. We have Corinthia, uh, our executive back there. She takes care of and help me with a lot of stuff. Um, but thank you. I'm very grateful to be here. That's very interesting. I see my sister. She shouldn't have that link, I don't think. But anyway, okay. Um, very grateful to be here and just want to kind of go through, I guess, side hustles in a sense, how to market them and kind of, I had a lot of fun doing this type of research. And when NYU Tandon asked me to do this, I was very appreciative, and I was right in the midst of some of my New Year goals with my business. My business is Transcendent Enterprise, and we have a video production company. We actually produce a lot of content for NYU Tandon. Um, I was a student at Tandon, graduated '06, and that's basically where I started. And the journey led me to here, I guess, like almost 17 years later, somewhat, 17, 16 years later. And even doing this presentation, I was starting to feel old because I'm just like, so many things have changed and it happened so fast. So uh, you just, I would say enjoy the time. You just, before you know it, you'll be here, all successful and I guess making things happen for yourself. So I don't have a PowerPoint, so I'm mostly going to be talking to you straight head on and showing you some screen share stuff of examples from my company of some things that we implement. And pretty much the goal is to show, marketing side hustles, show digital side hustles, hustles that you can kind of do at your house and it doesn't require you going outside, and also how to market those hustles. And, I use the word hustle loosely, but this is not a get rich. It's not a get rich scheme. None of these things are going to drastically change your life, but this could help supplement income, and this could also help you with your business acumen to be able to understand how business work and to understand how to negotiate, how to set your prices, how to implement your products. And I think everyone should take some time to themselves and start something on a side, something that they're passionate about, and see if they could get any monetary gain from it. And if you have a lot of fun doing it, I am very passionate about entrepreneur. This is something I live and breathe every day. I talk to my team about ways they can make more money, or we talk about ways of how we can improve the company. My best friend, one of my best friends, Greg, we talk every day mostly about innovative business thing, what's going on with cryptocurrency in the stock market. It's unfortunate that we are in a pandemic, but for some reason, oddly, it's a weird time financially. It's like, it's a line between uh, people could become either really rich and become broke really fast, or if you don't, or you could become really broke if you don't catch up to it. So, that's why I like having this talk to kind of bridge that gap and to kind of help people get in a space where they feel comfortable making money, because it doesn't have to be something that's dirty or something that's takes so much energy and pride. Um, so I'll start off with basically my story. As I said before, I went to Tandon, and 2001, I was admitted in. I was a confused freshman. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I actually wanted to go to another school, but I got a scholarship. And I'm not really ashamed to say that story because that's always a funny situation, but it's one of those things where I'm like, when I look back on it now, I'm like extremely happy. One, because uh, being at Tandon, I was able to be amongst a diverse field of friends. And I think that's important because it gives me a very strong outlook of how the world works. I just realized something too. I was supposed to have I wanted to have some music playing in the background. Hope it's not too loud, just to kind of make it smooth. Um, so where was that? So yeah, I appreciate the fact that I went there. Looking at it back now, because I have a diverse view on the world from different cultures, from all the friends that I acquired going there, and I got to stay home with family, and all that helped. But if I fast forward to around my senior year or junior year, oh, that's blurry, those years, because anyway, that's another story. Uh, I came across digital media, and I was at the time taking EE, and I ended up switching um, because I was very passionate about digital media. I had the dream to be like Diddy. So that was my role model. Kind of, I guess, wanted to have be in the music business and do stuff like that. And from there, that's why I pretty much launched a business. I was in the IDM project, IDM. It was IDMI when I was there, but it's IDM now. IDM major, and when they first started, and when they just started to get video equipment, and I was able to take some of the video equipment and go out to my friends, people in my church, family, and let them know that I'm available to do video. And my first job, I actually got hired by an alum, Joshua Washington. He hired me to do one of his school projects for, I think, $60 or $55, and that was to start to help me, start the video project and kind of funnel it out and have a deadline. It had to be done by this time, and to kind of have them. I wish I had that video. I would play it for you. It's like really terrible, but it's still funny. And Joshua wouldn't like that, actually. He would probably hate it, but we, to have the deadline to get that done and put it out, and to collect the money to kind of go through that whole experience. And I think from that moment on, something clicked inside of me, and I was very excited, and I just became very obsessed in a sense. So I found other projects, and I was teaching myself. So you always find me in the digital media room. It was in the second floor of Rogers Hall, and I was there all the time. And I spent the night there sometimes, even though that's probably not allowed. But I really spent a lot of time there, learning After Effects, learning different softwares, learning ways of how to really get something going. While I was in school, taking 20 credits, which that's a whole other story. So it was always understanding how to balance all those things out. The way I became a little more strategical to go to the next level, I started thinking of how can I really obtain more business. And even still to this day, I think of how to obtain more business. And the strategy I had then at NYU was to go to all the department heads and introduce myself and try to show them some of the work I've done, and just kind of keep an open relationship with that. So that's, number one, with whatever type of, side hustle, anything that you're doing, let everybody know, don't be shy. Let everybody know you're available to do it. So that's basic mouth to mouth. Let everybody know as many times as you can. I would say from there, I was able to kind of acquire clients at the time. Like I'm trying to think, because it happened so fast. So I went to the incubator. An old roommate of mine, Mike Wills, we actually was roommates, and as I said, Mike is also a really good example. He's an entrepreneur, and he has a couple businesses and doing very well. And he was able to, I started the business there mostly twiddling my thumbs. But he was somebody who introduced me to a lot of tactics, like SEO tactics, and understanding how to kind of get yourself recognized on SEO on Google. So I'll start back with that. And then I think I've done a lot of work with NYU since then, since 2006, 2007, 2008. But also I was able to get work with the National Society of Black Engineers, through alumni, Calvin Young. And it's one of those things that took like 6 years, for me to get, but that afforded me the opportunity to go to Ghana and, do work there. So let me kind of get into it. So I would say more of the mindset of what's important, of how to really market, or really get success from build the extra income, in a sense, I run, and I like running because it kind of teaches you about life. And one of the things I would say is almost like running a marathon. You cannot, uh, you can't run the marathon like really fast. And every time you think you're almost done or you feel like you're done, you have like 10 more miles to go. Um, and with marketing, also to just letting people know the ability to kind of let people know and do the product and kind of be kind and be grateful. That whole process sometimes might feel like a waste of time. You might take some loss, but you gotta um, let time go, let the process, enjoy the process. And before you know it, after 2 3 years, or like after running 3 hours, or 4 hours or 5 hours, you'll eventually finish if it doesn't kill you. And if it does kill you, it wasn't meant to be, and that's okay also too. And as I said, this is not get rich scheme. This is something that will grow over time, and that's definitely I would say my story in a sense. And as I said, this was definitely not an overnight situation of having an office in Midtown and having some of the clients like Facebook that we do work with, and NYU. And even through the pandemic, as I said, we're greatly blessed to be able to still keep the doors open and still run payroll. Um, and it's just for me, that's dedication. There's a lot of dedication. So, 101 marketing 101 basics. I would say first thing that's really underestimated is email marketing. Um, there is I don't know. I mean, I've started email marketing stuff when I first started my business, but I would say within the last probably couple of months, I started really approaching it a little bit more aggressively in the sense of sending maybe one or two a month, not sending like I'm Best Buy, sending it all the time, but just to kind of communicate to my current client base. But every time I send something, an email market out, it leads to an opportunity. And hence I would say that email marketing led to this opportunity. And it just kind of let people know you're alive. I'm gonna share the resources that I have, and I'll put some links actually in the chat so that everybody could kind of see some of those things. But I watch a lot of Neil Patel, and I'll type his name in the thing. Neil Patel, and he's basically a digital marketer, but he gives a lot of information for free online, and it's like compared to a lot of the other marketers that I hear as far as strategy and tactics, like his is great, and you see a lot of things happen when you practice it. So one of the things that he talked about with email marketing is, it doesn't need to be a fancy picture or anything like that. It can just simply be text, just very clear text, have a very catchy subject, and try to make the email as personable as possible. Next, I'm just going to kind of go down like sort of the checklist. Next is kind of using social media, and within social media, we can kind of get lost, but I want to kind of keep it really basic, and specifically talk about posting to like Instagram. There is another channel that I watch called Black Hustlers Club. It's a young guy, I think he's probably around his early 20s, and listening to him was a breath of fresh air. I'll put his name in the thing also too, so you have it for reference for his YouTube channel. And he is amazing because unfortunately I'm getting older and I feel like I'm a little out of the loop of certain things. And one of the things I do like about this business is that you have to humble yourself. You could be on top 1 minute, you could have the best equipment and have everything, but then the ability of, since everything's changing so fast, you can be that for 1 second, and then the next second you could be the old person with all the old equipment producing things 10 years ago. And I'm kind of afraid of being that particular company, and we're always trying to keep our ear to the streets and kind of keep things modern. And with that, as I said, I appreciated coming across the YouTube channel Black Hustlers Club, the Black Hustler Club, and he talked about posting on Instagram in the sense of take advantage of Reels now. He said Reels is something that they will automatically kind of more market because they're trying to more push that product. So if you post a Reel, most likely you'll get more views. Reach out to accounts, the Instagram accounts that's like yours, and ask for them to shout you out, ask them to post or put you in a story. Hopefully that can help you acquire some more followers. Go to other people accounts that's similar to the account that you're doing and follow those people. Go to their followers and follow those people. And hopefully that will lead for those people to follow your account because they'll see the similarities and they will want to be a part of that. He says post aggressively. I hear a lot of aggressive posts, for example, like, Gary Vee is a person I like to watch also too. And he speaks heavily about posting everywhere, posts on LinkedIn 10 times. I mean, some of it sounds a little overwhelming when he says it, but it is a reality. If you do, he said you're not going to fail, but it's just very time consuming and it's a possibility you might not, get too much sleep, and sleep is extremely important. So aggressive posting. So post aggressively, I would say at least once a day, but depending on the type of business you're in, if you're doing like a t-shirt business, something like that, you should try to post 2 or 3 times a day. Use a hashtag. It's important to use hashtags. Get a hashtag generator on your phone. That might cost something, but that can help you have a further reach. And I'll speak again about the YouTube channel, Black Hustle Club, where he does challenges where he will get a subscriber's Instagram account and he'll add followers to it in 24 hours. And he kind of explore how he did it. And this is some of the things I'm sharing with you. If you're confused about, I guess, generating content, use a site like, Reddit, search the topic or industry or field that you're in, and you should get some new or not so publicized content. Like I would say Reddit, or you could do hashtags in Instagram to be able to repost stuff to kind of keep your audience entertaining, pull them in some more to get some followers. And just an overall general, it's just an overall general strategy is that, because new social media, new things are being developed. For example, we have Clubhouse, and this is a new platform where, I don't know if you don't know, where they basically have audio conferences. It's pretty much something where there's rooms with many people talking, influencers, or you can start your own video room chat. And what's happening is it's a new social media that everybody's following. So this is another time to kind of reconnect with people. So you can use a new social media, a new platform. If you haven't joined a certain platform and you just started something, you can join those things and now start to reintroduce yourself to people. Next, what I would advise, and maybe this should have been right after email, which is, direct message your network in a sense. You should have a lot of contacts in your phone. Send a text, say hello to somebody. You don't have to automatically say, I do this. And I mean, all this stuff is the basics. This is the stuff that sounds like common sense, but it extremely could go a long way. Just check in on somebody. Hey, how you doing? Let me know if you need help with anything. And if they say, hey, I need somebody to come paint my house Saturday, hey, say I got 2 hours to come help you paint, and catch up and talk to them. You never know what that might turn into. So as I say, it could be simple as sending a text message, using WhatsApp, reconnecting on WhatsApp with people, sending mass text message on WhatsApp, just letting everybody know how you're doing. You don't have to specifically say that specific side hustle. And DM people in other social medias, Facebook, LinkedIn, or Instagram. Just follow up with people. And I would say you shouldn't really hit somebody up. You shouldn't really reach out to somebody on all 5 of those same things, one at a time, and do it within a span of, 6 or 7 months. Have a goal for the day to say, hey, I'm going to reach out to at least 5 people. And that can matriculate into something, and you never know. It's another person I'm going to type also that I watch a lot of his content, and he's really good with how you set up the mindset, Valuetainment, and what he talks about momentum and how, when you start a business, you have to develop momentum, and momentum is extremely important because what happens is when you're first starting is, and this is something I heard Kanye say about 10 years ago when everybody liked him. When starting a business is like pushing a big rock up a hill, and every step is going to be hard, but momentum is what's going to sort of help you get to the next level. And Patrick Bet-David from Valuetainment, he speaks on how momentum is pretty much, I should wrote it on a board, but he said basically it's one person, talking to one person every day, that's a certain amount of momentum, that equals a certain amount of momentum, or talking to 3 people in 1 hour, that's another type of momentum. But as long as you keep it up, you are going to achieve whatever you want to achieve. The person who talks to 5 people in 1 hour definitely have a lot more chances of being successful or getting his goals accomplished than him talking to them in 1 week. So, you have to take measurements. That's one of the things right now that I'm working more as an entrepreneur now, is to audit my business consistently, and also just check what's going on, assessing everything to make sure nothing is falling apart, and making sure that we are heading to the right place. So next thing is some basic. Let me see where I want to go. I want to use SEO, YouTube. I'm trying to figure out which one. Let me talk about YouTube. So YouTube, I'm very comfortable and very familiar with it, and I think it's a great place to promote and to market, and also you can make money there. Not so sure if everyone know, in order to start to make money in YouTube, you got to have 1,000 followers and have over 10,000 watch hours. And the thing about it is, even for somebody like me, I'm like, even me who I know the business, it's not impossible, but it's not easy. And the main thing is being consistent, and every time you produce a video, they're sending an email and let everybody know you produced it. That's going to give you some hits, and sending it to your social media. But also the video needs to be very relevant. And I see a lot of other YouTubers that I watch that I would say that are very, that's a good role model. Like there's a guy named Meet Kevin. And I see him doing some, what I feel like very innovative things in YouTube. He is literally, I guess I'll step back. He's more of a financial YouTube channel, and there's a CNBC link with him showing how he has his family, and they make $6 million a year. And one of the things about him that's amazing is that, he's pushing the medium. He has live. So when the GameStop frenzy was going on a week ago, he had CNBC. He will have CNBC in the background playing in the video. So you're basically watching CNBC with him, and he's kind of critiquing, saying that, hey, that's bull, or that's the truth. And he had like 30,000 people in the room, and it was his birthday. And at one moment, it was another channel I was watching, and this was something I thought that was amazing, that shows innovativeness and the capabilities, and how YouTube has infinite possibilities. Is that when you have 30,000 people and you're live streaming at that moment, you're literally talking to almost a stadium. You're right in the middle of Madison Square Garden, facilitating something. So I just thought that was pretty amazing, and to have that kind of following. But I mean, he's doing $200,000 months. Like he's making about $200,000 a month off of YouTube, but he's on there from 5 in the morning to at least 6 or 7 in the evening. Like he's on there. If I just on something on YouTube, he's there. He puts up about 4 or 5 different videos, and I just think it's very time consuming. And a lot of people who do YouTube, they set up an infrastructure and they burn out. So just to kind of, I don't know if you need some ideas or something like that, but he does it very well. There's another guy, Casey Neistat, who I'm a big fan of. He basically did a big YouTube wave of putting out videos every day, and high quality videos, just very vlogs, just about him and his family every day. And he burnt out. But he has a whole catalog of videos that people still watch to this day, and is still making money. And now he just has time just to play with his daughters, and he's in California, and he has a choice to kind of do what he wants to do. And who doesn't want that? So so if you do decide to do YouTube, some quick strategies you can do. This is from Brian Dean, who's very similar to Neil Patel. They're both very similar. I just think Neil Patel gives a little bit more golden nuggets, and I'll type his name in there also so that you have that if you want to look up his YouTube channel. Brian Dean speaks on SEO and optimizing YouTube. Some quick strategies is to, if you have a title saying how to run a mile, you could say how to run a mile and then put in brackets saying, set a new record. But he basically said that if you add brackets inside of your YouTube title, it allows you to sort of get more hits. I guess it piques the eye, or I don't know if it's a part of the YouTube algorithm that pretty much helps it get some more hits. Now, if the video's not good or if you don't promote it a little bit, the brackets is not going to save it. But these are just some things that kind of hit the YouTube signal, the YouTube algorithm. Also, too, he mentioned to engage with people. Tell people to hit the like button. Tell people to comment. If YouTube see that people are doing those things, what happened is that they'll push it up more and make it more relevant for people to see. He said that you have more chances of getting more views in the YouTube algorithm if you embed the video to a different website. So he said that also helps. Engage with the YouTube community. He said, you should reach out to other YouTubers. If you do notice, if you do watch a lot of YouTube, the YouTubers are, they know each other and they do reach out amongst each other, and that allows them to publicize and promote other people's channels. So, it's very hard for you to promote or be, it's hard for you to promote or get to the next level if you're not friends with everybody. You can't do it by yourself. When you write in the description box, have important keywords. Don't try to say too much, because the YouTube AI, or how it's reading your video, how it's reading your copy, you're writing whatever you wrote. What happens is you can't, it has to understand it. You can't say too much, because it would get confused if you try to put a whole bunch of different topics. Keep it very simple. If you're talking about fitness, say this is going to make you fit and healthy to, give you lots of energy. Like, keep it within that medium. Don't really stray from that. Don't say, don't talk about some other type of COVID vaccine or something like that if you're talking about fitness, because YouTube won't really know how to place it. And the clearer those descriptions are and on one track, it'll help it get suggested on the side when other people are watching other videos. Talk about promoting it on an email list, which is important. That's one part. And I want to talk about comments, which is also an interesting way. So for example, let's say you're not doing YouTube videos, and let's say you printed out t-shirts. Let's say you decide to do that. They have something called Teespring. Teespring.com. I gotta actually double check that. Let me actually double check that. But Teespring, where you can just send a company a logo, they'll print your shirt up, and when you send a company a logo or how you want the shirt to be, and you can promote it. And then what happens when people want to buy that shirt, the company would print that shirt out and send it right to them. And that's you being a fashion clothing line person in a day. So you just have to have a very catchy, fancy logo and go to that website, and you have, you're selling clothes. You're a fashion icon. But with marketing, some type of business like that, commenting. I mean, there's lots of comments, and you see people comment a lot. But also, commenting is if you have something valuable to say, it can help be very visible to people. But I don't like talking about it so much because it's very spammy. But sometimes, I mean, when I watch a video, there are comments that get pushed up that are relevant, and you're happy somebody comment there. And one strategy of a comment, if you see somebody post a video and it's long, if you make a breakdown with timestamps saying that this person talked about this then, this person talked about this then, this there, that's very helpful. And most likely you'll get pushed up to the top. And that might make people look into you, or you can put your website right there. Or, I mean, I saw other stuff too, where you can make sure that whatever it's a video with 1 million hits, and if you could get your comment to the top and it stays there, you can go back a week later, then put your website there. So now when people go there, they now see your website, and it's a possibility that it might be, they can click, and you never know, you might close a deal. But that's a little of a sneaky way. Or I've seen some other comments like, if you like this comment or push it up, you're a great person. And if you're feeling bad and need to hear that, hey, that might work for somebody. So if you look into comments, it's lots of. Oh, did we lose power? I paid the light bill. Con Edison. So yeah, so if you what was I saying about comments? So yeah, so with comments, if you, it's a very sneaky way, but it's an opportunity there if you use it. That's all I can say. I tried it and I failed, and I could get back to you that probably in a year. So let me go to some things that definitely did help me, which is kind of SEO. And SEO, search engine optimization, is basically it's a whole bunch of things, a whole art form. It's like almost like karate in a sense. So I can't. I mean, for me to get it where it's really tight, it will cost a lot of money, and but you can only do it at pieces of it at a time. But I'll share my screen, and I just want to just kind of show you some examples through my website. Let's see. And then I also want to show some other stuff too from that, which things that change some stuff for me. And I'm going to, I do not see desktop, Acrobat, Safari, launch. That's not it though. Hold on. I'm gonna take my time. Okay, here we go. Okay, so yeah, this is my website. Some things like SEO, if you see to the top, there is and actually, the company that is doing my website, this is supposed to be hidden, the Spanish page talking about live streaming. But something I heard from Neil Patel, which is most of the content now on Google, most of it that, that's clogged up is all English. And you can actually use Spanish to kind of get ahead of some people. So if you have both Spanish or you use other languages, Russian, that's possibly in the business, that can help you get ahead to start getting some calls. But you gotta make sure it's translated right. When I went to Fiverr and had somebody translate in Fiverr, and it's the same as my English page. So some things on-page SEO. Some things that you want to do. You want to make sure it's very clear on how somebody could get prices from you, how they could contact you. My phone number, everything's on the top. Say clearly the one-liner, like best full-service video production company in New York City. And kind of just to say some of the pages where SEO is working for me. If I go to Google and I type live stream company in New York City, I don't know if that's a term, but I should be here unless I got knocked down. So yeah, you see here, Transcend Enterprise. I'm not number 1, but I'm number 4. Okay, so number 4 is okay. It gets me some hits. I'm still working to get it pushed up, but this is very valuable proposition. It's what helped people call me so that I can get more business. And it's a lot easier. I'm not the type of person that would like to go sell people over and over. I'd rather them come to me with a need, because it's easier. You just let them know the costs, and if they can do it, you close the deal instead of chasing them for a whole year or 2 years and possibly still not closing the deal. But it's what works. So this is also 2 services. This kind of show, all these are like major search terms. So it's basically breaking down all my services into major search terms of what my company, the functions that my company do to help be searchable on YouTube. So definitely get a website. It could be a 1-pager, but just make sure that the terms in your the terms on your website is searchable. Let me see anything else. So what I've been doing recently, I've been using Neil Patel's tool called Uber Suggest. And Uber Suggest is a tool. Now, if we get into more advanced marketing, did I write that down? There are websites that, see if I wrote that down. I might have to search for that and look at that. But there are websites that basically help you create tools to build in more clients. And this is a tool that Neil Patel used to kind of suck in some more clients. What this is this help you see how well something is ranked online. For example, so let me see, since I'm already signed in, they give you 1 free situation. They have a lifetime plan for $300, which is a good deal. If you see the competitors of a tool like this, like Ahrefs, this is a lot more expensive. SEM Rush, a lot of those tools are really more expensive. This is a little more in-depth SEO, but so to kind of get to the point of what this does, I'm gonna sign in with my email, and I can kind of show you what this type of tool performs. Let me see, it's 1:10. I'm about 40 minutes. Okay, I'm gonna try to go real quick. So I'm trying to think. So yeah, I'll just go start off with. So I want to see what would it take for me to. That's like an obvious keyword for me. Let's see, it doesn't have that much hits. Let me I'll put a competitor. Like one of my major competitor is Indigo Pro, and I'm giving them some publicity, but they've been doing it for a while. So I'll put this website in, and it lets me know basically their search terms. It shows me what page most people are going to see, and it let me know what keywords they are ranking for with Google. And see, with seeing that, so like if I see time-lapse videographer, if I want to compete with them, I will start making content about time-lapse videography. Or I'll go to this particular page. I think, so you can see more keywords also too. So yeah, so this is where they rank heavy. So if I make content to kind of compete with these keywords, it puts me in better competition with them. So that's one part. So let's talk about something a little bit off, like that's probably a little bit more on top, another topic. I'm thinking t-shirts or let's talk about t-shirts. So let's say if you make 90s t-shirts, and you want to see when you put, and you can see this from Google actually too. But let's say you want to make 9 t-shirts. I don't know if anybody knows Martin Lawrence, comedian. I don't know if I spelled Lawrence right. I think I spelled it wrong actually. But this kind of shows basically terms of things that has high volume, what people are most likely searching when they search Martin Lawrence. So this kind of lets you know, if you make something like a t-shirt Martin Lawrence, or you're trying to promote it, you want to make sure these are the tags and these are the keywords that are put in there. And that's basically how, as I said, something like this is really useful because it lets you know the words to put there that's more important, because you can't put all the words there, but at least now you can put the most important words. Or you can know, but the thing about this is more competitive. You can also search to see which words are less competitive, in a sense where now you know you could be number one for those things, because you might not become number one for this thing because it's too high. But this kind of gives you an overall view of how Google's looking at it. Let me move on. I want to go to other websites. They have other websites that can help you market your side hustle. They, like, for example, we have something called Thumbtack, and this is something that we're on. But basically, you can list anything that you do here. I'm trying to see if I put Explore this is almost like a Fiverr. But just, it's one of those things, if too many people are on like a website like Fiverr, Upwork, freelance.com, they have other stuff like this also too that you can get on. And this type of website does very well. I mean, if I should have put that in. So I'll just put in Uber Suggest also, and we can see that. So if I put Thumbtack, so that this also helps me understand, this, as I said, they got 9 million people coming into almost every month. Like, I mean, we can put, I know Fiverr, let's see what Fiverr has. Fiverr has 3 million. Who has more? So Thumbtack is a bigger website than Fiverr, but Fiverr is more popular. So you could get probably more accuracy from, or more hits from something like Thumbtack. So let me see. Let me actually see if I can find my Thumbtack profile. So Thumbtack, sometimes Thumbtack is a website that you have to pay for. If you're a professional, you got to pay for credits for, and then it connects you with the client. Anytime somebody says they need a videographer or something, this website pops up and it gives you an online form, and you fill that out. And when you fill out that online form, it emails a whole bunch of other professionals to bid on your project. And they have a lot of websites like that. Thumbtack is one, GigSalad, Bark.com. And with these websites, it's important that you have everything filled out on your profile. You have good pictures. So this is Transcendence, Thumbtack. You have good reviews. I have NYU stuff. We have our prices. We have nice pictures. I don't even know those pictures, though. I'm looking for this. So it's just making sure everything is filled out and it looks good. Reviews is definitely one of the most important things. As soon as you finish a job with somebody, or send a mass email out, try to get reviews as much as possible. And this is kind of the same template with a lot of other platforms. As I said, Bark, Thumbtack, GigSalad. Start a Yelp profile, even if you do something as small as selling. I want to say selling t-shirts, something like that. Have a Yelp profile. Those things help with rankings. I just want to see what else. just some quick things that I was doing some research and I thought that was interesting. If you have a strong Asian market, they have, I don't even know how to pronounce it. I might chop it. It's called Bilibili. That's like the Chinese YouTube. I saw it before, but I didn't really kind of go through it. But that's something that if you want to get a niche in something and you can do the video in English and then have somebody in Fiverr translate it. And now that's something that can help push towards direct marketing. And that's a client. I should have, whatchamacallit. What else? Drop shipping. I know probably everybody's here about drop shipping. I didn't talk about it so much. I don't, there's a guy called Jay Rich. I like his YouTube channel. He basically shows how he made about $1.3 million off of, well, actually he didn't make 1.3, he made a couple 100,000, but then he put it in the market, it turned into 1.3. But he kind of shows some drop shipping strategies. And with drop shipping, is my music? With drop shipping, you have to, drop shipping is using a website. Most people use Alibaba that sells products like the Amazon in China to get very, very cheap products. And what they do, they're the middlemen. What they do is they put YouTube ads up saying that we have this product. You click the YouTube ad is to really attract impulsive buys. But it's a whole bunch of controversial going on. You can still approach it and still do very well. But as I said, it's a little controversial because what happens, you got shipping times that can be a delay, and then people can get the product and they can't return it, like the return policy. But some people are finding different ways of, you can find a good fulfillment strategy, you can really kill it and do very well at drop shipping. But it's using YouTube ads, which is another form of marketing. And that's what I've been actually doing as well. Using YouTube ads and Google ads and Facebook ads to really help push things to the next level. I just want to see complete profiles. I want to see if there's anything else. If you can do courses, udemy.com is very important, is very popular, but also you can offer courses on your website, something that I saw Neil Patel talked about that I thought was very interesting. Like you could put a course up for free and then just give a lot of stuff away in a sense. You could do giveaways also too, that helps a lot. You see, I don't even know if I'm supposed to say, but you could do giveaways. Then they have affiliate marketing. They have websites called ClickBank. And basically ClickBank allows you to recommend certain products. And if you recommend that particular product, they pay you based on the referral. It's like a referral fee situation. All those things get a little complicated because, as I said, you need to know how, you can use your network and kind of build it off from there, but you need to know how ads work in order to really make it flourish. And as I said, I recommend, that's how I write it down. YouTube channel, Jay Rich, and I'm trying to think, Black Hustle Club. I like that guy. Oh, wrong chat. Let me see. My fault. Hold on for a second. I'm gonna stop sharing my screen. I'm gonna put on it right here. Jay Rich YouTube channel. And let me see if I'm forgetting anything else, because we could go to questions. ClickBank, they have something called Max Bounty, which helps you get money off of leads. Maxbounty.com. I'm gonna type these websites in. Maxbounty.com. And I'm trying to see, is there anything else that I want to talk about? I think that's pretty much it. I'll get to questions. I feel like I talked too much. So how would we orchestrate the questions?
Hey, I have a question.
Yes.
Thanks so much for that. That was super informative. I wanted to ask you about the difference of building a brand that's either personal brand or the name of a business. And if you have any suggestions on that, especially like I just joined Clubhouse and I I'm kind of on the border of creating a business, and I'm not sure. I have a weird name, so it's somewhat difficult to pronounce, but it's still, what I have gone by for a long time. But I don't know kind of how to move forward. If you have some suggestions, since you've been doing it for a lot longer.
So you're saying creating a personal brand
Versus creating like the name of a business. So my name is Tundi Sauce, which is a bit of a foreign name, versus my business name would be Design Life Well. Just like that's just an example, but like in general, making a personal brand about your name versus creating, like a business company name.
Yeah, I would say my take on that is, I always like I'm more pro business name because I feel like the business entity could last longer. Like me setting up this company is something I'm, setting up for my, family in a sense. And it's funny because I think with thinking of how to represent myself, I'd rather represent the company and the team rather than my personal name. But when I look at somebody like a Diddy, he's, his name, or Michael Jordan, these people are heavenly, their brand is in their name. And I always worry when the brand is in the name, like how much further can the brand exist after they retire or they pass away or something. So I feel like sometimes a company, my recommendation is to build a company and have the company represents the brand. And, the brand speaks on how the work is done, how it's represented on the social media platform, how well you deal with people, how well you write your emails, how well you treat everybody. All those things kind of measures the brand in a sense. But I don't know, how do you feel about that?
Because like I look at Gary Vee and I'm like, it's complicated because I feel like they're feeding into each other in a way, but I don't really know if maybe it's just a matter of having both. But I agree with you that it's like, if I think a brand name is like a little bit more broad, but I don't really know, to be honest.
Yeah, I would say Gary Vee is a good example in a sense. Gary Vee is a personal brand. Even though he has his companies, the companies, VaynerMedia and his other companies, but he's really the brand. If anything happens to him, if he gets hit by a car tomorrow, God forbid, I don't know if we're going to hear much about that. We don't know nothing about his brothers. But let's talk about Starbucks. I don't even know if I think Harold Schultz, the CEO, I don't know if he's still the CEO. I haven't really looked into their information lately, but Starbucks has its own brand. I mean, anything happens to anybody inside of Starbucks, it's not going to stop you from getting your coffee.
Yeah. Yeah. In my business specifically is like course creation. So I'm kind of seen as an expert, but at the same time, again, the name is limiting. I feel like I agree with you that it's limiting in the long run. So yeah. Thank you.
No problem. Any other questions?
Hi, Chris. Thank you so much for taking the time to do this. My husband and I own a business. It's a new business, 5 years. If you could provide just what kind of budget should we be thinking about in terms of marketing? So you touched on search optimization.
Mm-hmm.
What are the prices for this? Because in the first few years, you're struggling to break even.
Oh yeah, what's the business?
We are invested in a moving and shipping business. So
Okay.
we have a website, we have web presence. Right now, we're getting a lot of work through word of mouth. He's been in the industry over 10 years. So he ended up bringing some clients with him when he left his previous employer 5 years ago. And so we're at the point where we're in the beginning stages of marketing, but we're also at a break-even point. And so, to bring it to the next level, what should we be earmarking for?
Yeah, my approach was like I would say in the beginning phases, you should really try not to spend any money. I mean, if you have the money to, spend money that you are willing to lose. That's the way I would approach it in a sense. But with building the business up, I would suggest really evaluating your competition. I would do, I mean, the first thing when you spoke to me, I would say take advantage of like Facebook ads, or take advantage of Google ads. Make a poster, and you could put it on Instagram and boost it from there. Or, I mean, it's very kind of user intuitive. They have a lot of, I'm trying to think, who do I watch specifically do I like about who talk about Facebook ads? I mean, you can watch a lot of videos on how to kind of make Facebook ads and talk about, and the special thing about it is that it helps target your specific client. But even within talking to me now in this forum, I mean, it's 23 people here. The question should have came off as, hey, Chris, I have a moving company, da, 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 my name is this, just so that also rings, that also helps send the vibration out. Somebody's in a room in the midst of moving and they're going through that stress. They might chat in the tech box or hit you up directly and say, what are your rates or something? Where are you? Only because of, they might be at that pain point. So I think, and that's more of what I'm trying to speak more on today, in the sense of make it obvious that, of kind of what you do, even asking a question, you should mention your business or something, because that helps promote it to the people that's here. But, and I would say with the Facebook ads, since you asked me about monetary, I would say right now I'm doing something that's like $5 a day, and that's getting probably 100 people on my website. That's probably getting about between 40 to 60 people on my website every day. And that's turning into maybe 2 leads or so. So, I mean, at the end of the month, that's like $350. But if I get 2 leads, that could be arranged from as minimum as from $1,000, $1,500 to a maximum of $7,000 or $8,000. So the $350 is worth the spend. So I feel like you can, but Facebook ads is cheaper. You could spend something like $20, and that's almost like $5 a day too. But you can spend something like $10 and almost get $5 a day, and just measure and use those things. But I definitely say get into ads and try to market towards your area. I think that would help you get some information to figure out how to do everything else. And you have to have your website. You have to have the landing page. Look at Neil Patel and just kind of follow what he says and take the time to do what he says specifically. And start the journey, start the marathon run. I mean, that's all I could really say. It might sound a little exhausting, but for it to get to the next level, that's what it's going to need to be. Try to do at least 30 minutes a day. You will be surprised of what that can turn into. Is there anything else? I don't know if I answered your question as far as anything else, because I said
Yes.
you spend money, maybe about $200, $150 the most, and
Thank
put it into
you.
ads. Yeah.
Yeah.
Ads, yeah.
That sounds reasonable.
Chris, we have a question in the chat from Ariel Foster. I think we have time for maybe one more, so I'll read his question. I am a consultant for DEI trainings. Do you have any suggestions on how to market with specific target groups that are not mass ads on Facebook or Google? Anything on how to write newsletters, emails, or anything could you advise?
So now you said, what's DEI training? Is that fitness training, or that's what I don't know specifically to understand how to target the groups?
Diversity, equity, inclusion.
Got it. Okay. I'm trying to think. I mean, that's like I'm in that category in a sense. I mean, I think when you are on ads, you have the option to put websites. So you can put NSM. I can't even say that it's basically NSMBCC. There's a lot of diversity organizations, and you can kind of tag the ads to whoever is inquiring on those websites, that Google will basically reach out to that audience. I would say, if you look online, like LinkedIn, you see a lot of people following certain people in that diversity and inclusion. Like all the people that I know could give me potential jobs at corporations, I'm following them in a sense. So if you can tag it to those specific people, or go to their profile and kind of see somewhat of their interests, that can possibly help. Newsletters and emails. I think in the diversity and inclusion. So I'm trying to think. You train minorities. I just want to see what is specifically your business, Ariel. If you could type specifically, like, are you training minorities or are you looking for corporate? So that's what I'm just trying to figure out. I train white people, maybe. Got it. Okay, that's kind of funny. But I get it, understand. So you're looking for, you're more soliciting for corporate. I mean, my thought, I mean, it's funny, I'm promoting myself in a sense, but it's like, I would put kind of a video full of satire and a little bit funny, showing what happens in a workspace where people don't know boundaries. I mean, it's kind of a taboo, but people would talk about, people are very confused, and especially these times as far as how to approach somebody with a specific hairdo. How, should I touch it? Should I not touch it? Should I not say anything? There's so many videos that can be made that could catch someone's attention, and you can just promote it through an ad. And I think that can maybe bust well, I wouldn't say it's not the one thing that will make it go viral, but I think it could start to build some healthy leads, in the sense to have a dialogue and get people talking. Just get that one video. I would say if you write out the script and everything, and if it's a simple script and if it's short, you could get somebody on, it could be as low as maybe 300 to 500. That's really cheap. If you get someone like me, the lowest I could do is 1,200, 1,500, something like that, to put the whole video together for you to have. So, I mean, that's what I would do. Hope that helped.
Hey, I just have one other quick question.
Okay.
Is it better to niche in the beginning or to start broad and then see what works and niche down after?
I think it's better to go niche. I think it's better to close as many deals one by one as much as possible. Like, try to target, get specific. I deal with being broad as well, because the type of video we do is a little bit broad, but now I try to really stay close to corporations, because it's the way how my business is built out for us to service the clients. But I think it's finding the lucrative niche and the lucrative need. So that's mainly what you need to kind of focus on. But I think definitely niche is definitely more important than trying to be broad.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much, Chris. Thank you to everyone. I want to be mindful of everyone's time. Do you want to say anything in closing, Chris?
I did have a quote from Jay-Z, which was, I don't know, it's kind of condescending a little bit, but it's, if you can't get money in this earth this big, you are worthless, kid. Just to kind of talk about, there's plenty of opportunities out there. And even though this world with the pandemic is crazy, hold your head up high. There's opportunity. If you're at a job you don't like and you want to switch out, there's opportunity out there. And like, just the research I've done, I just couldn't believe. And I didn't talk about, like, you can get paid for audiobooks on Fiverr. You could get paid to help people with video games. Like go on Fiverr.com and just search and press the explore button, which I meant to do, but we've run out of time. And just see all the different jobs that people have solicited, that people are getting paid for, that people are paying for. Like, you can see that people have reviews, they're getting hired to do these things. So if you feel not inspired, go to a website like Fiverr, and you can see a whole bunch of things that you can do from your house to help generate some secondary income or change your primary income.
Awesome. Thank you guys again. I'm going to put in the chat our virtual programs page. You'll find the recording for this session up in about a week, and our other sessions are there as well. I want to thank Chris once again. This was wonderful. Thank you so much for your time and expertise. And we hope to see you all at a future Tandon Teaches session.
Thank you. Thank you.